Welcome back to my channel. My name is Blondie Bites, and today we are going to continue making our personal website. Last time we were focusing on the content of our application. We went in and we found a template, we got some HTML code and changed some of the text, links, images, all that good stuff. But now we are going to answer kind of the question, what is it going to look like? Before we were saying, what is this website going to say? But now, what is the design? What are we going to do with that? And so that's what we're actually going to focus on today. We're going to use a little bit of creativity and develop kind of the vibe and the style of our website. And the way we're going to do this is with CSS. And so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is open up our previous project, which was our personal website. And to do this, you'll go ahead and open up the folder that you were working in before. You'll open up a browser, and then you'll just drag in your index.html into that browser. And so with that loaded up, here it is, our old personal website that we were working on before. And so last time we were focusing on the HTML code. We had images, we had text, we had links. This is what we were working with. But now we're going to move towards the design. And to do this, we're going to go Control-Click, and we're going to have a bunch of options here, and the one we're going to select is Inspect. And this is going to be the key to our success in designing this website because it's going to allow us to dynamically change the content while we're working. So this little side window pops up here, and on the top we have HTML code, and on the bottom we have CSS code. And so from before, HTML code consists of tags. You have the head tag, you have the body tag, there's an opening and a closing tag here. The head contains all of our metadata, the body contains all of our content. And within the body, we have divs, which help us organize our content into different sections of the web page. And then inside of our divs, we have specific elements such as a header one, a link, all of that good stuff. And this contains our real meaty content. Just reviewing from before, the A stands for a link, href is its source. My blog is going to be the text that's displayed, and we have an opening with the A here and a closing with the A there, and it's all wrapped in this h1 tag. And so that's just a little bit of HTML code, but of course if you scroll down and you open up some of these other sections, you can see the HTML code that was from before. Now in this tutorial, the thing we're going to be focusing on is this button. And so we could go and try to find this button within this HTML code, but we can actually just go to whatever element we want to inspect. And an element is just something in HTML, and so it's just you have an H1 element, you have a P element, which is just paragraph text. You'll have an A element here. These are all elements, and they're going to be selected in the CSS so we can work with them, design them, and make them really pretty. And so back to before, any element that we want to inspect, we'll go ahead and Control-Click on it, and for us it's going to be this button. We'll select Inspect, and now we're inspecting this button. And so here we saw it's within this header div, and then we go down into the footer, and there it is, our button. And it's really just an A tag, and so it's a link, and it has a special class that allows it to be designed in this specific way, and then the text is start. So how do we design this? Going down here, we see the CSS, and this can look a little confusing, but it will make sense in a minute. Dragging this up here, now we can figure out how CSS actually works. And so here we have something with the ID header, so that probably matches up with this div ID header, that kind of goes together. And then we have something with the class button, and so that probably goes with our button, which is here, class button. And these are all the attributes that go with that button. So if we try taking something away, so if we take away the line height, that was what was helping center it in the middle of this circular button. We take away the font size, now it's not as big. We take away the text align, nothing happens. And so you can kind of mess with this and see what happens when you take certain attributes away. And that's what these are. Each of these individual things are attributes. And so we have a display attribute, and then it has the value inline block. We have the attribute width, and we're going to assign it to the value 4.5 EM. And that's just a measuring tool that we can use here in CSS. And there's lots of other things we can look at as well. And so scrolling down here, we have a background with a certain color, and that looks like it's the background color of this button. We can go ahead and change that. We can select this, color here, and we can pick any color, any color we want. Say we like that gray color that we saw before, or we can actually scroll down and say we want it to be this dark purple, and so we can pick a color that's already in the web page and assign it to that. Now, colors can be represented in a variety of ways here in CSS. Notice here we have this hex number that's kind of like an ID that is attached to the color, and so if I give you this color, it's going to give me this hex number, and if I give you this number, it's going to give me this color. Another way we can look at this is RGB. This is just another way of representing this color. And so here we have RGB, which stands for red, green, blue, and it's a certain amount of red, green, and blue that are within this color. The A stands for alpha, so it's how transparent the color is, and if it's 1, it's not going to be transparent at all. And if we go 0.5, you can kind of notice it's a little less opaque. And so we'll change that back to 1. And say we really like this color, we like this for a blog, it kind of goes with the background that we are going to put in for this picture here. We're not going to use the template background, and we like it. Now, what's going to happen when I refresh? Well, bad things will happen, so we should go ahead and kind of copy this RGBA, and we're going to paste it. This is the code that we were working with before, and we're just going to paste it at the top here, so that way we can keep track of it later on. Going back to the page, we'll go ahead and refresh, and now the color is where it was before. So what this inspector tool really allows you to do is it allows you to preview what's going to happen before you actually change it in your code. But be sure to actually make the changes that you like in your code, so that way you don't lose everything that you were working on before. But it's a really nice way to see how things will look, if you change certain things. Now let's go ahead and actually change this button color to be the other color that we decided here before. So how do we find it in the code? There are a couple of ways. Notice we have main.css here, and it gives us a number, and that's a line number. We could go ahead and find that in our code, or we could do Control F and try to find this color and then just replace that color. Or we can go ahead and try searching one of these things at the top within this main.css file. But how does CSS even get attached to this HTML file? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. So here in our head, we have something called link rel style sheet href assets css main.css. So there's that main.css again. And so what we're doing here is we have our HTML code, and then we're going and we're fetching this CSS file with this link tag, and we're saying it's a style sheet, and so it's going to contain all the styling for this HTML page, and then we have a link to it so we can go ahead and find it. And so looking at all of our folders here, if we kind of close this up, before we had our images, which are going to be any of the images we're using in our HTML file. We have our index.html, and then these are just other files. If you click home, drop down, left sidebar, if you click these things, you'll get different versions of a web page. So this is all, in the template for free. So say you were doing a blog and you really liked this format, you could customize this and then have this be your index.html, or copy and paste these elements into your index.html. And so notice up here we have left sidebar.html right here. And so that links up with this page. And the same thing for no sidebar, right sidebar. These are all just HTML pages that are being loaded onto the web page. But our main core page is our index.html. These are just other ways you could style the content that's given. Lastly, we have the assets, and these assets are what are the things we're adding to the page besides the structure, besides the skeleton. It's going to give us the meat and it's going to give us the skin if, the HTML code is the skeleton. And so here we have CSS, and that's going to have our main CSS file that we saw before in the inspector. We also have things with fonts, and so if you want to download fonts and then import those, that's the way you can do that. We have JS code. Don't touch this. It works, and don't touch it because that's more difficult, and you shouldn't need to mess with it if you're going for, you're the most basic website so that you can have something to show employers. That's something you can get into a little bit later, but sticking with the basics for now, you can just leave that alone, and the same thing with Sass. It's just another way of using CSS, but don't worry about that. And so let's go ahead and go into the main CSS, and this is going to be the index.html file and the main.css file. These are the files that you're going to be using the most when you're starting out. And so we can go ahead and go to, what line was it? If we go back to home, and then we do control click, and then we go to inspect, we have 190. And so let's scroll down to 190. This is a lot of code, but if you know how to navigate your CSS, you'll be good to go. And there we go. We have 190. Here we go. And notice it says button, so we already kind of have a clue that this will probably be the right code to reset. And here we have all of the CSS things that we saw in the inspector window. So we have position, display, background, and there's that color. So if we go back, the color that we have here before is DF7366, and that is the color we are going to want to change. And so this is a hex code, but we are going to go ahead and put in our RGBA code. And that's what we had before over there. And so if we save this, make sure you save your CSS or else none of it will work. And then you refresh this. Now our button is this other color. However, when we hover over it, it's this, really bright orange. And if we want to make it more subdued, or if we want to make it, a different type of purple, we can do that. And so say we take this again and say, when we highlight it, we want it to be like a lighter gray. Say we like that. We'll go ahead and copy the RGB value. Where'd you go? Up here. Go ahead and copy that. But how do we find what this highlighted color is? We can't really select it because if we do control click, it goes back to the color it was before. Well, we can go ahead and try to look over this CSS code and find it. And so here we just changed this RGBA for the background color, but here we have hover. And so this must mean when we hover over the button, something different is going to happen. We're going to have a different color. And so say we put this hex code into Google, you can see what color it actually is. And so here it's going to load, and it's this orange color. So this is the culprit. Now we'll go ahead and go in here and delete this part. And you might be wondering what the difference between background and color is. Color is the font color, and background is the actual background color for the thing. So just clearing that up. We save that. We can refresh this. Now we have that. When we hover over, we have our gray color there. And that's because we changed it in our actual code in the CSS, saved it, and it's already linked together in our index.html with the link here, with the link rel style sheet, so we're good to go. Now there are two main ways to categorize certain design aesthetics in CSS. We have classes and we have IDs, and we were looking at them both right here in our CSS, so you've already seen them before. A class is a set of design aesthetics that you're probably going to be using a lot. So here for our button, the way a button is going to be formatted for this website is probably going to be pretty similar for each button. We're going to make it a circle, and we're going to put some text in the middle, and then we're going to style that. And so because we're going to be using that button aesthetic multiple times, we're going to save it in a class. And to save it in a class, all you do is the dot button, and then put whatever aesthetics, whatever attributes that you want inside of that. An ID is something you're only going to have once. And so here we only have one header, so header is an ID. Another example of an ID might be button 3, because you're only going to have 1/3 button, and it might look different than the other buttons you have on the page. And so if you're only going to use that set of design aesthetics once, you'll just do hashtag that ID and then put in within the curly brackets what you want to do, adding in, whatever attributes you want. And so that's how you put it in the CSS. You would do something like, if you were doing a class, you would do dot button, say that's your class, and then you would put margin whatever, whatever attributes you wanted. That would be kind of the example for a class. And then for a ID, you would go hashtag, button 3, and then put in whatever you want, margin, whatever value you want for that. You'd put that right in there in the CSS. The reason we have both the ID and the class here is because we're talking about only the buttons inside of the header ID. So here we have the header ID. Only for the buttons within the header ID, go ahead and style them that way. And then of course the way you select that ID is just with ID equals and then the ID, and then for class it's just class equals and then that class. And we actually have a bunch of classes for this button. We have the class button, we have the class circled, and then we have the class scrolly. And so these are all different classes that are in this particular element, which is the A tag. So that's a little bit of CSS. Basically, when you're trying to design your website, use the inspector to kind of mess with stuff, take things away. Like if we took away the background, now there's no background. Just mess around with certain values, and you can kind of get a sense of what certain attributes do and what values you can give them in order to get the design you want. When you're trying to connect the changes you've made into the inspector into your CSS code, be sure to use Control F to find, certain elements, whether it's a color or a certain value, or, scroll down to the right number, or if you're looking for a certain, ID class, use the Control F because that will help you navigate your CSS much faster. If you're curious about more attributes or elements that we haven't gone over here, try looking at W3 Schools or Tutorials Point, as they have some great documentation on what's available in HTML and CSS and what you can actually create with these things. I showed the basics here, but now you should have somewhat of a foundation to jump from here and find exactly what you want on the web. So say you wanted a form, you could go HTML form W3 Schools. And this would give you some kind of form, created from HTML. There you go. So whatever you're kind of looking for, whether it's a button or, a certain thing to do with an image or some type of, drop down or whatever it is, just Google it with HTML or CSS in the front and then W3 Schools or Tutorials Point, in the background there. One last thing before you go. One thing you might be wondering is when I click, let's say we click start here, we go down a little bit. The way you can do this is actually with IDs. And so say when we click start, we wanted it to bring us down to like the footer here or just a little bit more down the page, then you can just go into your index.html. And here we have hashtag banner. That's going to take us down to the banner ID, which is here. But another ID that we have is footer. And so instead of banner here, you can put footer, save it up. If we refresh this, we go ahead and click start, it's going to bring us all the way down to the footer. And so you might not want to do that, but when you are customizing the links to drop down left sidebar, you'll probably change this to like about me or whatever you want it to be. When you click that, you can have it go to a certain part of the page by creating first a link here with an href and then an ID somewhere down the page. And so here we had the example of footer by just surrounding something in div ID footer or whatever ID you want. You can go ahead and actually have links that link you down the page versus to another website like Google. And if you want to change those navbar links, all you have to do is go up here. We have a href, we have this. All you got to do is change that to hashtag footer or whatever you want it to be. Right now it's a dead link because it's just a hashtag, but notice these go straight to those other HTML pages, and just, change those source links, and there you go, you have different links. So I hope this was helpful. You are on your way to creating your own personal website now. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And if you have any suggestions for other videos in this series of Create a Website, or any other things you want to learn about virtual reality or game design, those are things I haven't done before. But if you're interested, comment down below. Be sure to subscribe as always, and I'll see you in the next video.